Imagine it's negative 10 degrees outside. You're wearing a parka and you have a dog sled, and you're about to travel 100 miles north to an Indian village. This was the life of Egerton Ryerson Young. Egerton Young was born April 7th in 1840 in Crosby Township, Upper Canada. Growing up, he wanted to be a teacher, so he got his certificate in 1860 and he taught for several years. But he had this calling on his life, he knew God wanted him to be a minister, so he prayed about it, and finally he went to seminar in 1865. And while he was there, they had him start riding circuit routes. So he would go from church to church in different towns and just preach. And he got ordained in June of 1867 and became the first pastor at the Methodist Church there in Hamilton, Canada. And he got married on December 25th that year to Elizabeth Bingham. And they lived in Hamilton, and about a month after they were married, Egerton received a letter from the mission board asking him to be a missionary up in Norway House, northwestern Quebec, to the Cree, Algonquin, and Saulteaux Indians. So he called his wife in and he handed her the letter, and they read it, and she said that they should just pray about it. So they prayed, and after about 5 minutes, they both realized that this is what God wanted them to do. So the journey north isn't as easy as it is today because of how easy travel is. It took them 3 months to get there. Norway House is about 2,953 kilometers from Hamilton today, and that's on the roads that we have now. So they traveled by foot, by covered wagon, and riverboat. So their ministry with the Indians, as soon as they got there, they started it right away. They got settled, and he did what he knew what to do, and that was ride circuits. So he went from village to village, different tribes to different tribes. And he said towards the end of his ministry that the circuit route that he did was 500 miles in length and 300 miles in width. That's the size of England. And he was the only missionary there. So while he was traveling from the different villages, he always had guides with him, and they would help him translate as he was learning the language. And just with a ministry like this, there are dangers with it. One time when they were traveling, one of his Indian guides almost drowned while they were crossing a frozen lake. And another time, one night, it got so cold that the Indians told him to wrap buffalo robes across his face just so he wouldn't freeze. But he, being not used to that, just left part of it open so he could breathe. And in the next morning, that his nose and cheeks were frostbitten, and the Indians were surprised that he didn't die. So, and we have to remember that whether it's the missionary or the people that you're ministering to, that everybody goes through hard times. Towards the end of his ministry as well, one of his daughters died. They were traveling down a riverboat, and she drowned and fell overboard. And he didn't find out about it till 2 weeks later. And then he was traveling to a different village, and he got there, and it wasn't like normal. No one was out there to greet him, so he went into the main teepee or wigwam, and all the adults were in there just solemn, and that he found out that they were in mourning because an outbreak of scarlet fever came and killed pretty much almost all the children in that village. So he heard that, and then he was praying that God would give him the words to say. And God gave him something to say, and he said, "I know where your children are." And that got their attention. They looked at him, and he was able to tell them about heaven and about Jesus and salvation, that they could go and see their children one day. So one of the special services that they had was called Love Feast, and it's not what you think, but it was a special time. It lasted about a weekend, and it was Indians from all the different tribes that he witnessed to, and they'd all come together in a central place, and they just give testimonies of how good God's been, and they'd sing songs, and there's just preaching. And two of his main disciples that he had, Timothy Bear and William Mimotus, both of them were very good soul winners, and Mimotus actually became a local pastor to a lot of the tribes there. So Reverend Young retired in 1876, so his ministry wasn't long. It lasted about 10 years, and because he had health issues, and then he eventually died in 1909. But Indians now, they're called First Nations people. And the largest tribe is the Cree Indians, and they have a population of about 120,000. And as of 2011, there are 3,100 Indian reserves across Canada, and 28 of the reserves are in northwestern Quebec, which is where Egerton Young was. And missionaries, now this was the part I was kind of nervous about, because northern Canada, you don't really hear about missionaries, especially to Indians. But I was able to find one missionary family. They are the Dave and Marcia West family, and they've been in northwestern Quebec since 1981. And they are the only independent Baptist missionaries in that area. There is one other missionary pilot, but he only flies in, brings supplies, ministers, and then flies out. So the West family has started a church in Malartic, northwestern Quebec. And one thing I thought was neat, one of the ministries that they do, is that they follow the movements of the different Indian tribes, so all the paths they go, and they hold VBSs for all the kids. So I thought that was really neat. And they are involved in discipleships, hospital and jail ministries, and they also go to all the reservations, and they're able to preach and minister to them. So what we can do now for them is pray. The West are praying for someone just to come and help them with their work. Because they are getting older, they're in their late 50s and early 60s. So we can pray that they will continue to see souls saved and then pray for laborers. Something I learned was to have determination to make sure that everyone has a chance to hear the gospel. And just to be faithful, just because this was a hard mission field and just learning of the determination that they had. His ministry was short, just 10 years, but he made an investment in lives that would have otherwise never heard the gospel.